There are tons of gender bends in anime. What about them makes us keep coming back for more? Welcome back to OtakuDaiKun, dai-chan here. If it wasn't already incredibly obvious by now, I really enjoy anime gender bends. After all, this channel has a manga series all about living with one's own gender bend. Be sure to check out my playlist on that if you didn't know. Now that we've been graced with the first season of Onimai, I thought now would be a fantastic time to explore this subgenre and reveal what makes it so fascinating. Specifically, I want to take a look at 3 different genderbend anime that each offer something new. Of course that includes Onimai, but I'll also be discussing Ranma half, as well as Makoto Shinkai's film Kimi No Na Wa, or Your Name. If you enjoy this content, be sure to like, comment, share, and smash that notification bell as if it were your waifu. Consider supporting the channel by signing up as a member on YouTube or joining my Subscribe Star or Patreon. All 3 platforms offer the same perks, such as early access and exclusive content like my Lessons in Magecraft series. Without further ado, let's dive in. In order to get started, we should properly define what a genderbend story actually is. Basically, it's whenever you have a biological male or female, and through some kind of magic or science fiction means, they're perfectly transformed into the opposite sex. In that regard, I suppose it would be more appropriate to call this sex bending, but I'm fairly certain the term genderbend came out before more modern gender discourse. While such an ideal sex change would be highly valuable to trans people, gender bends don't usually count as trans stories. I imagine such an anime could exist, but it wouldn't properly fit the genre. If the one being transformed actually wanted to be the opposite sex, then it'd be more of a slice of life without any conflict. That's fine, but these gender bends tend to base their humor, excitement, and drama on the conflict that ensues when someone actually struggles with their sudden transformation. In that regard, making these characters trans would indicate grooming to an extent, as it's typically not intended or consented upon. Instead, just like tomboys in anime, gender bends are compelling for how they play off our existing gender norms. They make us question our assumptions about gender, and that sort of discussion is universally valuable. Let's start with Ranma half, which tells the story of Ranma Saotome, a young martial artist who accidentally falls into a magical hot spring. It curses him such that he turns into a girl whenever doused in cold water. Likewise, he can only revert to his male form by touching warm water. This gimmick is present throughout the anime's 161 episodes, 3 movies, and various OVAs. While it's never the main focus of the narrative, it's one of many elements that make this romantic comedy all the more chaotic. I suppose the larger conflict is whether Ranma and his fiancée Akane can finally get along, but there are a number of episodes in which Ranma desperately wants to remove the curse and stay permanently as a guy. To that extent, Ranma is unashamedly masculine, aggressive, and competitive. Thus, when he becomes a girl, he has no innate sense of feminine modesty. Historically, women have been encouraged by society to be more modest, conservative, and ladylike. The expectation is that women should be delicate, graceful, and aware of how others see them. Having grown up as a boy, Ranma hasn't experienced this societal pressure, and he's sure as hell not gonna cave to it. This makes female Ranma an instant tomboy, brilliantly voiced by legendary actress Megumi Hayashibara. She's rash and reckless. Even when she owns up to her femininity, it comes off as forced and exaggerated. It's ironic, considering Ranma constantly teases Akane for her tomboyishness, complaining that her temper makes her uncute. This lack of modesty can be literally seen with Ranma's chest. He often transforms multiple times per episode unintentionally. Ranma could be running down the street as a man, only to turn woman by a sudden bout of rain, or some old lady tossing water into the street. Because of this, Ranma doesn't wear a bra, as that would mean wearing one even as a guy, just in case he transforms. As such, Ranma's perky breasts are often very noticeable under her baggy clothes. When she's in the middle of a fight, her clothes might get ripped, revealing cleavage or, quite frequently, full frontal exposure that I very much appreciate. While modesty would dictate that she get embarrassed and cover up, that concern takes a back seat to what Ranma's trying to accomplish in the moment. She's not gonna compromise her fight on account of that exposure. Instead, the other girls have to remind her to cover up when the men get all flustered. Ranma does internalize this to an extent, but it's never enough to stand between her and her goals. Hell, she's often more willing than anyone to use her female body to her advantage. By playing into her cuteness, or using her feminine side to gain access to certain competitions, Ranma optimizes her opportunities in life. Not to diss modesty or anything, as that has its own appeal, but we have to admit that demanding modesty can be repressive and toxic. There's something refreshing about seeing a girl who doesn't let her body get in the way of her actions. It makes Ranma both sexualized and not at the same time. Yes, her body is attractive, but she's also busy trying to get things done. It's like seeing the schoolgirl who's brave enough to throw a high kick even if it reveals her panties. What's she gonna do? Not defend herself? Not be a badass? The show's creator, Rumiko Takahashi, must have been keenly aware of this when making it. I'm sure Ranma as a character gave her a lot of fun ways to express the female form. Unfortunately, however, it's not just social norms that push women into modesty. It's also a defensive mechanism women adopt to avoid the unwanted advances of man or other predators. Even though women shouldn't have to be the ones covering up, many choose to do so for their own safety. Turns out, Ranma has to deal with this too, when it comes to her classmate Kuno Tatewaki and the old man Happosai. Kuno-senpai is absolutely obsessed with female Ranma, even stealing her first kiss. He has zero restraint when it comes to hugging and clinging to Ranma, and he's so blind in his affection that he never realizes his beloved pigtail girl is actually the same Ranma he detests. Happosai's even worse, being a diligent and conniving underwear thief. He keeps trying to get Ranma to wear different bras, or even straight up dive into her cleavage. Ranma never cowers to this, but it does show how prevalent and annoying this attention can be. Even then, it's still refreshing to see how Ranma deals with it. She'll either kick the dudes into oblivion, or intentionally use her body to manipulate them. She takes control of these situations, which is a profound part of her charm. Next, let's take a look at Makoto Shinkai's Your Name. I'm choosing it over other examples because it features a woman being a man, in addition to the typical gender bend. Now, technically, this is a body-swapping anime, as the characters aren't actually transforming. Taki's a boy living in Tokyo, while Mitsuha is a girl living in a country village. The two become connected by fate, such that they begin waking up in each other's bodies. They're left with no choice but to live each other's lives, trying to cause as little damage as possible to their normal routines. Despite this, their different experiences as men and women inevitably shine through. Taki's situation is much like Ranma's. In Mitsuha's body, he doesn't have the same instinct toward modesty. He's either not aware, or simply not concerned with how others see her body. If the dudes are gonna get flustered because playing sports makes her jiggle, so be it. Taki's not gonna let that stop him from scoring a point in gym class. If defending herself from rumors or bullying makes her come off as aggressive, so be it. Taki's not gonna accept being bullied without a fight. Mitsuha finds this behavior embarrassing, which shows how repressed she is. In that regard, Taki's assertiveness actually helps her. Likewise, Mitsuha being in Taki's body presents new opportunities. Exactly because she's a girl and has grown up as such, she better understands the sensitive and delicate concerns of her female peers. This makes Taki come off as more considerate and emotional, which brings him closer to his crush Miki at work. Who'd have thought that a guy who could empathize with a woman, as well as So, would be so popular with the ladies? There's something liberating about a guy who can be a legit gentleman, as opposed to being so stoic and aggressive all the time. Both Taki and Mitsuha bring each other a bit more toward the center of the gender spectrum, further from the toxic extremes on each side. It's not that either of them should have to be forced to change, but rather, the wacky narrative excuse allows them to test the waters a bit. That brings us to Oni-chan wa Oshimai, or Onimai for short. It tells the story of Mahiro Oyama, a college-aged, unemployed shut-in who lives with his genius little sister Mihari. In an attempt to rehabilitate her brother, Mihari spikes his drink with a special potion that, overnight, transforms him from a young adult into a teenage loli. With his daily life of seclusion interrupted by this jarring new development, Mahiro is pressured into going outside, where he meets new friends and gets a second shot at his youth, only now as a girl. This makes Onimai more complicated, in that Mahiro experiences both a gender swap and an age reduction. Being a NEET and hikikomori have rendered him antisocial and self-conscious. While society finds these traits pathetic in an adult male, they're seen as endearing in a little girl, which is presumably why Mihari thought gender-bending him would work out so well. Ultimately, it does work out, as he loves his new life so much that he decides he'd rather stay as a girl of his own volition. Again, though, we're dealing with two separate things. There's the gender bend, but also the second youth. Part of me wonders what would happen if Mihari's medicine were remade Mahiro younger. The idea that some people just get crappy gotcha look in real life is explored in anime such as Relife and Remake Our Life. Both of these anime are based on the fantasy that if we were allowed to revisit our youth, especially with the same knowledge we have now, we'd be able to vastly improve our circumstances. In Japan, youth, and the time spent as students, are especially precious. To an extent, many anime are set during this time so that adults can vicariously live that period again and again. Japan's work culture is also so extreme and invasive that the process of becoming an adult can seem sudden and jarring. It makes sense that people would want to postpone adulthood, especially if their student years were disappointing. The assumption is that people who have well-adjusted school lives will go on to be productive and responsible adults. Perhaps a second go-around is all that's needed to properly rehabilitate someone. At the same time, however, there is always the risk that going back to school will simply reinforce a person's disdain for society. We might be inclined to think that Mahiro becoming a shut-in wasn't just a matter of bad luck or timing. Maybe there's something about being a man that failed him the first time around. Maybe, had he been born a girl from the start, he would have had an easier time fitting in with his peers. The way Onimai presents it, Mahiro is accepted by everyone better as a girl. Her sister's friend Kaede, for instance, instantly adores her for being cute and shy. As fellow girls, Mihari and Kaede encourage Mahiro to hang out with them. Mahiro also has an easier time making lasting friendships with other girls. Momiji, for instance, sees Mahiro afraid to shop for groceries and decides to step in. Also, Mahiro's excitement for video games makes her popular among the boys at school, whereas she could have been seen as one of the nerdy kids. As a boy, those things could have hurt him more than helped him. Perhaps Kaede would have found a young male Mahiro cute, but she wouldn't have invited him to do the same thing she does with Mihari. His timid nature at the grocery store may have deterred people from helping him out, thinking that he as a boy needs to grow a pair and see it as a learning experience. As a girl, Mahiro being a gamer was a rare commodity, but as a guy, he'd be a dime a dozen. The anime doesn't show us much of how or why he became a shut-in, but from what I've seen of the first season, it's fair to conclude that, assuming Mahiro was always timid, he would have succeeded better as a girl due to societal expectations. That said, people who become shut-ins can very well start out confident and grow antisocial over time. The longer they stay secluded in their own world, the more paranoid they become of being seen as awkward when they go outside. With that in mind, it's also possible that Mahiro just needed to try again with a new deck of cards dealt to him. That was certainly the case for Rudius in Mushoku Tensei, who had a much better upbringing the second time around. Speaking of Rudius, however, brings up another question. Is it okay for someone who is technically a grown man to be role-playing as a little girl, having fun with actual people way younger than him? Rudius stayed as a guy, but he also retained the mind of a grown pervert. Helping his case, however, was the fact that he had to relive his entire birth and childhood. Mahiro doesn't have that experience. Just because Mahiro's now in the appropriate body, does that really make him one of the girls? This was almost addressed when Momiji first saw Mahiro's room, a cultured space filled with figures, lewd magazines, and wall scrolls. Mahiro made the excuse that it all belonged to her fictitious brother, but I'm curious what Momiji would have thought if she knew these legit were Mahiro's belongings. Even more intriguing is what Momiji would have done if she discovered Mahiro's penis at the hot springs. Would the girls be able to accept a young boy into their group? Would he be welcomed if he were a trans woman? At its peak, how would the girls react to finding out Mahiro is both a guy and an adult? Personally, I don't see why Mahiro can't be both a child again and a girl. The friendship he forges with those girls is sincere, even though it started with a lie. He also had to live as a kid again for a while to even want other kids as friends. Because he never grew up as a girl the first time around, his new life as a girl is very new to him, putting him more on the same emotional level as his middle school friends. His past experiences don't give him a considerable advantage, especially given that many would consider his first life a failure. That said, it's hard to imagine their friendship working out in the event that Mahiro wanted to turn back to his original body. The image of a grown man having a sleepover with a bunch of middle school girls would be creepy as hell. The little girls would probably run away, and Kaede would freak out for exposing herself to what was ultimately a guy. Is that just our own prejudice, though? I mean, that essentially is what's happening in the anime after all. The trans interpretation makes this a little less creepy. If you argue that Mahiro was a woman all along, just starting out in a man's body, then what we're seeing now is what should have been. Legally speaking, people have every right to transition as adults, but by that point, they've already gone through puberty, as well as lived out some of the most important years of their lives. Confident in the desire to transition, what if trans people were able to travel back in time so that they could do so earlier? That in itself could be seen as a new start. What throws a wrench in this interpretation regarding Onimai is how Mahiro never consented to being genderbend. In line with the genre, he's distressed by his new body, and every new experience in it comes as a shock. He does make the most of it, even having fun being a girl, but in the last episode, he says he took the medicine so that he wouldn't have to part with this new life. That doesn't necessarily mean he prefers being a girl, but rather, being a girl is essential in keeping his friends. Additionally, even if Mahiro genuinely prefers being a girl, would her decision be fair? Would Mihari be without blame for forcibly transitioning her brother? Was this grooming? Technically, yes, but is it really as bad as it sounds? This one's honestly tricky. The majority of people tend to prefer being the sex they were born as, but that could very well be because it's familiar. We never get a fair, unbiased chance to try out what it's like being the opposite sex, so how can we know for sure what we'd prefer if we had the choice? Life already decides so many things for us. For example, I love my wife. The fact that I could have found happiness with someone else doesn't at all compromise that love. Sometimes you're so happy with how things have turned out that even if you have regrets, you wouldn't want to change them. I think the trans interpretation would be more appropriate if Mihari's medicine only lasted a couple of days, giving Mahiro the chance to opt out at any time. In the anime, though, he only gets to make that choice after he's built up a new set of friends, after he's made a major commitment to this new life. Then again, Mahiro could have started episode 1 by demanding he be changed back. He could have spent the entire anime as a recluse, refusing his sister's suggestions. He was gonna stay indoors anyway, so it was his own curiosity and personal drive that carried him through most of the time. Originally, I said that Genderbend stories aren't really trans ones, but I suppose in this case it has the potential to become one. It's actually pretty rare that the Genderbend character wants to stay that way forever. The biggest difference then between this and a transgender story is that anime gives us an ideal transition. It skips the process of needing makeup, voice training, hormone therapy, and surgery just to pass for society and for your own standards. Heck, Mahiro actually gets her period, which isn't something that science can currently achieve. That's why these anime are fantasy and wish fulfillment. They aren't real, and we shouldn't treat them like they are. We can, however, use the ideas they present to have a deep and meaningful discussion. To make that happen, I'll need your help. What do you think about any or all the things I brought up in this video? Do you like Genderbend anime? If so, what do you think makes them so appealing? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.
Thanks for watching!
If you enjoy this channel, help us grow by liking, commenting, sharing the video, subscribing to OtakuDaiKun, and
Most of all, smashing that notification bell so you don't miss out on all of our anime discussion, lore, or Let's Play content.
you can support us directly through Patreon, Subscribestar, or our YouTube membership, all of which come with benefits like exclusive vids and early access.
As always,
Celebrate your fandom.
I want to give a special shout out to all my $10 and up supporters: VideoGamer75, Elise Trash for Skinko, Dante Pendragon, Stephen Elak, Samuel Gersten, The Nonchalant Ostrich, Otaku Mom, Jens Ballman, Mystic Samurai 1983, Lord Omagoden, Free Brick, Olympian Doll, RNGer Shuffles 1498, Alexis Yukio Gomez Yamato, Link Pendrago, King Kobo, Observer Bellis, Flash Daniel, James Hewitt, Uncanny EXP, Andre Foster, Jared Kraus, Matthew McAfee, Game King 352, Caitlin P, Vladimirovna, Jonathan Padua, The Taz 96, President Irina Vladimirovna Putina, Maxwell's Demon, Kengo X77, SF Giants Fan Mike, and Akakaze Yume. Thank you all so much.